This video is on early childhood lesson planning. It's part 2 on creating assessments. So as we talked about before, you're going to use a 3-part objective. And that 3-part objective then will become your assessment. So remember, the 3-part objective has the target behavior, the condition under which the behavior occurs, and the criteria for success. When you've created that, that becomes your assessment. So for example, you're going to think about what do you want them to do, how do they do it, and how much or how well do they have to do it. Here's an example of what that looks like. The students will be able to identify the main character is what you want them to do. How will they do it? By drawing a picture. And the criteria for success is that they have 3 details showing what the character looks like. So that becomes our assessment now. So there are 2 different kinds of assessment. The formal assessment is your learning objective that we were just reviewing, and that will measure how well your students meet that learning objective. The formal assessment is completed during independent practice, and it needs to be developmentally appropriate with active learning. So in general, not quizzes, not tests. This should be a performance assessment where young children are showing what they're able to do. In addition, you're going to have an informal assessment that takes place throughout the entire lesson. So we might call this a formative assessment, and it's things like observations, anecdotal records, discussions that you might listen in on, or questions. You could actually answer the questions to see how well the students are understanding and able to do what you want them to do. This allows you to change the lesson as needed while you're teaching. So you don't have to wait till the end of the lesson to find out things weren't going well. You can either slow down or give more help, or maybe they're getting it really quickly and you can speed up and maybe add more rigor. So the informal assessment helps you to adapt your lesson while you're actually teaching it. So we have an assignment besides your lesson plans. There's an assessment assignment. You're going to create the 3 assessments for your lessons and submit these as an assignment. And at least one of the lesson must have a rubric. You could have a rubric for all 3 of them, but you have to have a rubric for at least one of them. And you're going to include at least one rubric in that assignment. Let's look at how we use this performance-based objective to then create a rubric. So you take the wording from your rubric and from your objective and you put it into the rubric. So here's an example. The students will identify the main character by drawing a picture that includes 3 details of what the main character looks like. So notice how I created my rubric. The first column is always going to be for your students' names. And then the other 3 columns are the 3 things that are part of this objective. The first part is that they'll identify the main character. The second part is that they will draw a picture. And the third part is that they will have 3 details. So you can see how I put that into my rubric. And then I can score each one of these things. You'll see the rubric key down at the bottom. So I'm going to put the student name there, and then I'm going to give them a score, a 1, a 2, or a 3, for how well they were able to do these 3 things. If they did it really well, they'll get a 3. If they did it partially, they'll get a 2. And if they are not yet able to do that, they'll get a 1. So that's the rubric, and we're going to be using that rubric to assess our students to see how well they learned what we were teaching them and what we're going to teach them next.